Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Al Bissmeyer, the Global Vice President for Viamedici, and I'm glad you've taken the time to get with us to talk about sustainability. It's been a topic for the last several years, but in the last month or so, it's been a super hot topic. If you look at the Wall Street Journal, they've done articles on digital product passport. They've done articles on the ESG. They've talked about forever chemicals about a week and a half ago. Gartner has listed sustainability as one of its top three initiatives and priorities for this year in their Data and Analytics Summit. And recently they commented on a LinkedIn session around digital product passports. The DPC actually did a whole symposium about the sustainability summit that was held in London about 3 weeks ago. And they talk about everything that's associated with sustainability, from ESG to DPP to um, product declaration sheets. So really, it's an overall very encompassing. And what we're going to talk about today with Sustain 360, which is why I'm very glad that they've decided to partner with us, is we're going to hone in on digital product passports as well as electronic product declarations, or EPDs. And so those are really two things that we'll be spending some time on today in concert with our PIM solution and how it applies to our PIM solution. But we're really looking forward to doing more with Sustain 360 in terms of ESG, in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting with our MDM solution, and addressing supply chain requirements. But before I get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Viamedici and just give you a thumbnail on our solution and our organization. So we are actually a company that has been in business for 20 years. We're a leader in terms of providing solutions to the marketplace. We do multi-domain master data management. We do product information management, digital asset management, and working with everything, all media, all assets. And we also do dynamic configuration as well as CPQ. We are the only company in the industry that does PIM and dynamic configuration as an integrated solution set. And one of the key elements of this is that we are able to take this and put it into e-commerce applications as well around product syndication. And so there's a lot of benefits for organization as it pertains to that. Recently, we've won a number of awards. We actually have been noted as for our technology prowess by the likes of Gartner, by Information Difference and Forrester, as well as HFS and IBC. A number of different groups have actually notarized our capabilities. But one of the things that we've been most proud of is the feedback we get from our customers, the peer reports. So when you look at us in the MDM category and the PIM categories, we are listed as a top performer by our customers based on customer ratings. And I think that's also reflected in terms of the customer retention that we have, which is 99.3% customer retention over our 20-year history, which is really pretty exciting from our perspective because we put our customers first. We've actually been growing at over 100%, and we have over 400 customers that are using us throughout the industry. Speaking of customers, we had a great event last week. It was a customer event where we shared success stories and best practices. We talked about emerging technologies and solution sets that were there. We had a number of keynote speakers that were there. I guess the most noted of whom was the COO of SAP. He actually talked about how Viamedici enhances SAP solution sets and complements SAP, and which is really very important to our customers because over 80% of them utilize SAP as a back end. So that was part of the excitement. Another thing that was very exciting is we were able to actually release our new product, EPIM 5. So EPIM 5 actually does a number of things. We've been doing AI in the industry for quite some time. We've been doing auto translation and localization. We've been doing some categorization through the utilization of AI. But in this release of the product, we actually have produced an AI hub and gateway, which allows you to do AI enhancement within your firewall and then exchange to external AI solution sets and optimize the use of those. So the hub is kind of a hub and gateway capability. We've also done a lot of enhancements to AI in terms of being able to have an AI chatbot that does auto search for you, can find out information within documentation and or product data or customer data or supplier data. We have domain experts within the MDM solution set that actually can be used to specify specific products that meet a criteria that you have, or they can see which customers are using which various products, these types of capabilities. And we've enhanced our UI and navigation. So we've optimized it and made it state of the art. And you'll get a feel for that in the next slide where I show a screenshot. But we have hired on some usability experts and people that are actually very good at user interface. And we've optimized the user experience as part of our solution set. Another thing that we've done is we actually have dynamic configuration and framing enhancements, which really is a very key aspect of our solution. We are known in the industry as probably one of the greatest experts in terms of product data and product information management. And what our dynamic configuration allows us to do is configure products both in a B2C and B2C realm, B2B and B2C realm, which ultimately allows you to configure a product in lot sizes of one. So you can specify specific attributes that you want in a product for yourself, and then you can actually order those products. And what we've done is we have a new framing technology that allows you to actually dynamically modify the graphic, not only the configuration itself or attribute sets, but the graphic that's associated with it, so that you can put that on an e-commerce application and see the dynamic interaction with the image itself. And so that's a really cool feature, and I think a very valuable feature. We also have a real-time data store that can be used to push out information in real time, and can also be used for component-based e-commerce. So more and more companies are utilizing our PIM and MDM capabilities and bringing them to various channels through component-based e-commerce application. We had talked about last week, we showed some of the voice interaction where you could actually do ordering based on voice, which is really cool. And then we also had a digital shelf optimization, both from an operational perspective and as well as an analytical perspective. And then we also went into digital product passports and electronic product declarations or documentation, and the full lifecycle management, which Baz will get into, both with a discussion as well as a demonstration of the solution set and the interaction between Sustain 360 as well as Viamedici. So this just gives you a feel for the new look and feel. In this instance, you can actually see that we're using AI for auto text generation within the organization. And so we have a number of customers, some of whom want to keep all their product data internally. And so they want AI to work within their firewalls. They don't want any product data going out into like a DPL or an external language processor from an AI perspective. And they use their own internal auto translation in concert with our AI capabilities to do text generation around their product information. These are some of our customers. These represent our typical customers that we have. And as you can see, they represent a number of different industries. We have companies in the building and supply industry. We have companies that are in the medical and biotech industry. We have companies that are in the automation and electronics and high-tech industries. A number of our customers are manufacturers. We also do B2C. We've been doing a lot more in CPG and retail recently. Many of our customers are global. As I think I mentioned before, I'd say 80% have SAP as a backend. Typically, they are managing 20 to 40 languages, somewhere in that realm, and localizing their products across the globe in terms of Europe and North America and Asia. And most of them are using our solutions for multi-domain. They'll start out with product initially, and then they move to customer or supplier or location or region. And a lot of them use our product for reference data in terms of what they're working with. Speaking of which, our multi-domain solution is best in class. We have the ability to actually have a view of all the various domains and how they interact with one another, managing data governance and having a golden record around master data management. What I don't show in this slide is the hierarchy and what we do from an inheritance perspective and how we interact from a management of data perspective in terms of both reference data as well as inheritance. But we have, and you'll see, a quick ability to tie various domains and various attributes together so that you can maintain a whole view dynamically with regards to interdependencies of these various domains and attribute sets within your application. And so that's something that we do from an MDM perspective. If you look at our technical platform, we have a platform that is really best in class. It allows for a few things. I'm not going to go into great detail because it will be here for a while, but in subsequent webinars, we will definitely cover the whole platform, and we will cover the various applications that I outlined before. But there's a few things here I would like to point out to you. One is that we have a full workflow capability, business process management, which can be both manual or automated. So as you're putting in an asset or you're bringing in data, you can actually have a workflow that's associated with that. And you can also have a workflow for what information you're syndicating out and what's going to what various channels or what's going to various applications and how that's working. So that's one of the key capabilities that we have from a solutioning perspective. We also have the ability, obviously, to utilize AI and ML. I kind of talked about that a little bit before. But we also have, once information is approved and put into something that has been approved, it is put into a data store, and that information is made available real time to any application or any channel that needs it. And so what we're seeing some of our customers do more and more is utilizing the data store and component-based e-commerce to actually push out data and utilize it in various interesting ways in terms of marketing and in terms of getting data out to systems that need it within their supply chain or their value chain on the sell side. So that's another thing that we are really seeing, and the ability to visualize that from a visualizing engine perspective is something that we have. And we also have the ability to tie in and get into applications via APIs and a process development toolkit that allows for the access to data. So our partners are able to bring data in and out of the system. And that's exactly what we're doing here with Sustain 360. As you can see, we have them as part of our apps in our app store. And basically, Sustain 360 goes through our API and delivers information bidirectionally to EPIM. So we send the bill of material information to 360, and then it actually does computations on the product information within the bill of material and sends that back into 360 from a PIM perspective. So what we're going to be talking about today and really focusing in on is our PIM capabilities and Sustain 360 as it pertains to EPDs as well as DPPs, digital product passports, and the PIM capabilities, because it's all about product and having those reports available, whether they're printed reports or whether they're e-commerce or syndicated information. But then over time, we will be working with 360 for scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting with regards to MDM, ESG, which will also be part of MDM. So it'll actually be a larger segment of our solution stack here. And Sustain 360 will be doing more from that perspective. Before I hand it over to Baz, I'd like to mention that not only in the spirit of sustainability and environmental capabilities, we are also a green cloud solution. So we are sustainable. We believe in it, and we actually have a green hosted application as part of our cloud services to all of our customers. And so with that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Baz before I introduce him. So I met Baz over 2 decades ago, and at the time he was the chief architect for Emerson, and shortly thereafter he became the chief technology officer of one of their largest divisions, and was working in their data centers and trying to optimize energy use and looking at sustainability going back several decades. And so it's no surprise to me that Baz is the founder and CEO of Sustain 360. And with that, Baz, I'll turn it over to you.
Al, thank you very much. Great to meet everyone. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Great working with the Viamedici team. And how they fit in with Sustain 360, I hope at the end of this webinar is pretty obvious as to why two parties have come together. So just step back a little bit with those who are kind of just learning about this area in terms of sustainability. A couple of sort of background slides of just level setting. I have a kind of 3-pronged slides where I say what's going on with climate change. This is not a fact-based view, which effectively says that if you look at industrialization and the warming as a result of burning fossil fuels, the temperatures have risen. That obviously has a direct relationship in terms of the average daily temperatures, which are above 1.5 C in 2023. That's the second sort of wheel here. And the net result of these two factors is that obviously we've got a warming planet driven by human-driven climate change, and that results in impact in the sea ice and increasing so sea temperatures and increasing sea levels. So it's kind of a vicious circle here. It's going to feed itself. So that's just level setting in just very simple fact-based approach to what's actually going on. Some of the responses to that, one approach which was put together in about the 2015 range, or maybe even earlier, was the United Nations went and put together the ESGs, environmental sustainability goals. About half of them are related to the environment, and then there's an overlap with others with the social side of things. All good practice. A lot of companies, Fortune 100 companies, have adopted them and have corporate sustainability objectives and reports published on an annual basis. Another response, which is taking traction, is moving from what I call a linear approach. I've implemented a number of ERP systems in my career, and it was always kind of source the material, make the product, ship the product. And so that's kind of a linear approach. You really don't think too much about the consumption of that product and the use of that product, and then the recycling of that product once it's left the factory. So take my laptop here. When I bought it, am I aware of what to do with that e-waste? Once I've want another model of this particular laptop, I'm not really aware of what is the retailer where I bought it from, got some incentive to sort of say, I'll take that back, maybe give me a credit against the new one I buy. Not really in there. So there's a move now to around circularity, and there's two constructs within that. And circularity, obviously, so you're looking at sourcing material, raw materials sustainably. You're then manufacturing those with minimum waste and recyclability in mind continuously, and reducing environmental impacts as you're manufacturing and transporting. And then when you distribute, and the consumer or end customer buys your product, they are fully aware of what to do with that product and how to recycle it, and where the waste and possibly coming back into the manufacturing cycle, so that the original manufacturer of the product maybe can get back the material and reuse it for the next generation of products. So that's kind of circularity. There's an ISO standard around this now. The methodology, as you'll see later, which has been adopted in this space, is called LCA, lifecycle assessment. If you're not familiar with them, you may want to look up. And it's really looking at an end-to-end, what we call cradle-to-grave view of your product value chain. Another approach, which is the Paris Agreement, was to define what is an emission, and really focused on carbon emissions. Again, those who are not aware, and there's a lot of people not aware of this, is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And well, what does that all mean? And there's a lot of definition and mathematical calculations around it. In summary, what it means is that when you're driving a car, obviously you're consuming, and let's assume it's a combustion engine there, the tailpipe emissions out of there are, as you're driving, are direct emissions. As you go and fill the car up, and you go to the gas station to fill the car up, well, the gas which you're filling into your gas tank is effectively an indirect emission because you're buying the fuel from the gas station. Let's go to. But how the gas then got to the petrol station is an entire supply chain which made it happen. And from the extraction of that oil to the processing, the petrol processing, the refinery, then the distribution, what we call upstream, midstream, downstream, and then retail in the oil and gas industry, that is scope 3. And so data shows that 70% of all emissions are in your scope 3 area. It's also related to the use of that material by your customers. Yeah, it's also scope 3. So that's a kind of, and if you look at what's been going on, most companies have done a very good job on Fortune 100 companies getting their arms around scope 1 and scope 2, and it's got energy consumption, and then having a strategy towards renewables, from fossil-based fuels to renewable fuels, so to get to a kind of a net zero on that in the future, 2030 or 2035. So a lot of announcements and good work being done on scope 1 and 2. But scope 3 is really the elephant in the room, where we still need a significant amount of work to be done. So what we've done, Sustain 360. Sustain 360 started out of the gate and said, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Let's look at scope 3. We focused on scope 3. We can do scope 1 and 2, absolutely, but our true north is to help companies grapple their scope 3 emissions and measure them, report them, and reduce them from an environmental perspective. And to do that, we have ESG modules in our software, which allow you to report your environmental footprint, so from a carbon perspective to customers to regulators, very basic stuff to go do that. But that then gives you the baseline to take action, and that action is circularity. If you didn't have Sustain 360, you would buy another module to do that, another software package, or maybe Excel, and you're really modeling circularity of your products, as I mentioned earlier, around cradle to grave. And so how do you reduce your impact and model that out from your baseline, which is in your ESG? So that's what circularity. When you do that, you got to look at that from a risk perspective. And what we're doing in the future release is bringing out a climate risk module, which allows you to look at risk because of changes in your material and your supply chain, to adopt the new method of reducing carbon or environmental impacts. So that's what Sustain 360's module is. Not easy. Scope 3 is a data challenge. It's not a big data challenge in terms of volumes of petabytes of databases or something. It's really a case of disparate data in different places, and it's not connected. And so how do you get to silo data sets across your enterprise and outside of your enterprise and connect that data set? Second thing is looking at performance from a climate perspective, but also from a financial perspective, and benchmarking and comparing different materials, different processes, different methods of transportation, for example. So how do you do that benchmarking and comparison? And that's not easy to do unless you're using a lot of Excel. So we've allowed you to do that. And then those two things, when you brought them together, can allow you to report your progress to the board, to your chief sustainability officers, and to the market around meeting climate and regulatory needs. So that's how this all fits together. Now, when you've got all that data, and you'll see in a bit that there is, the data is there, it's just disjointed, and you bring that together, it allows an opportunity to future-proof yourself from a regulation in the EU, which is in draft, and it's going to be published in terms of what they call EcoDesign. So this is looking at a product end-to-end, and having a circularity around it, promoting sustainability for greater durability, reusability, and circularity of that manufactured product. But it's digital because you've got evidence. Well, if you're going to have evidence and you're going to digitize things, like a digital twin of a product from a sustainability lens, what do we need to bring together? We need to bring together product information. Well, Viamedici, you could see Al saying 400 customers, deep integration with ERP systems, have really brought all that information and data together in their EPIM solution or various stages of EPIM implementations. So there's a place you can go to for product information. You've got a place where you can get bring that data into sustainable lens, so they can look at it from a sustainability perspective through Sustain 360. Here's where we think the future lies in terms of ensuring that we don't have greenwashing, that we are not misleading the consumer with over marketing of the potential of our greenness or our products, when the reality is something else. And so how do we give evidence and confidence? And so by embedding a blockchain in here around the data payload, that allows it to give us evidence that this has been done ethically, morally, and can be validated independently that the data is accurate and trusted. So that's our view of Digital Product Passport. Obviously, you need to bring the data together. EPIM is a source. You need to glue that data together and then present that in Sustain 360, which is what I'll demonstrate next. So let me just go through the demonstration here. So let me go through a journey here. I hope you could see my screen. Let me go. Firstly, the e-commerce site. So this is where the consumer is interacting. And if you're online right now and you scan that QR code, you'll actually get a digital product passport for this power drill. Okay. So you're interacting from an e-commerce perspective on a site. You've got some evidence, an eco score, a rating, and a QR code, which is giving you the evidence that this has got a rating of 2.98 and a BB. Well, what does that mean? What does the evidence? You can go scan that, and you can do that real time if you want, and that should come up. Well, how will we put this? How has Viamedici been able to put this e-commerce experience on the site? So I go to Viamedici now, and I'm in EPIM now, and you could see the hierarchy of that drill down to its sub-assemblies, down to its suppliers, down to the markets it's being used, the factories where manufacturing is occurring, and all the componentry and all the assets. If I go into the components, you could see the screws, the wires, the magnets. That is in your bill of materials, in your bill of material routings, and you brought that data, most of that data into EPIM, or if you haven't, then it's pretty straightforward because EPIM is connected into your ERP systems as a single source of truth around the product hierarchies and standardization of metrics. So have we got the right unit measures, the right currencies, right values? Well, MDM and EPIM can ensure that the quality of the data, the accuracy of the data is there. So that's how, from an e-commerce site, the publication of that information is occurring through EPIM into the e-commerce site. And this is a representation of that drill and the hierarchy within it. So you're all asking yourself, well, hopefully, well, how do you get the sustainability lens into this? So what do we do? I mentioned earlier, there's an integration between Sustain 360 and EPIM. We've built that. That extract and integration, the API, allows us to push data from EPIM into Sustain 360. And this is all real. This is not mock-up. This is real information we're showing. Is a visualization through a canvas of a knowledge graph, which allows you to depict the asset, which is in this case the power drill, the scopes, remember those, we mentioned those earlier in terms of the Paris Agreement definition of scope 2 and scope 3 in this case, all the submaterials within there, the battery, drill bits, and the motor housing, the battery, lithium battery, the drill switch, the motor, and so on, and its submaterial, all represented down here. And here's the beauty of this. So you could take this down to a chemical level, to a molecule level, and you could see here that we've taken a plastic, and I believe there's another plastic here as well, and we brought that down, and we could take that material, we can go to another database, and we can then decompose that down to a chemical structure. So you can look at that chemical structure and then go against another database, which is from the EPA and the natural NIST as well, which is got a category of databases or data sources which say whether they are forever chemicals at the molecule level. And if it's a forever chemical, then this will be flagged and it's identified there. It won't have a blue mark around it. You'll have a red marking because this has been identified as a potential forever chemical. So you can actually go down to the molecule level within this. But that gives you the level of granularity in detail. And these lines and mappings and relationships, see them as carbon pathways or environmental pathways between producers and consumers of carbon. When you've built the knowledge graph and the relationships, which is basically your bill of materials being brought in from EPIM, we then allow you to build a bunch of dashboards. And in this case, we've got a dashboard which allows you to visualize the global warming potential by scopes. And we don't just do it for global warming, we don't just do it for carbon. So if you want to look at this from another metric, let's say you want to look at it from a toxicity perspective, then what is the toxicity of that product? And you can see here that by scope and total, you've got the toxicity. So you got not just the carbon lens, but you got a biodiversity lens of that. You can then explore and interact and look at how things were calculated. So if I look at that motor housing, how was that calculated? What was the carbon rating for it? I mentioned this eco score, which is effectively an aggregate of all those metrics, which I showed you earlier. And there's a kind of a rating against it, so it makes it easier for an end customer to understand. And then you get all the details around how that motor housing has been brought in. So you can explore the relationships. And then if you look at it from a more granular level, and you say, well, hold on, you've got all this information around the suppliers and supply chain. Well, how can we visualize the supply chain? And so you can go in, and because we've pulled in the suppliers and the supplier metrics, we can look at it and say that, well, where's that battery coming from? That battery, we know that. We know the information that the battery is coming from China. What route did it took? We know that from the ERP systems. We brought that data in and effectively calculated its distance, and for an individual battery, calculated its carbon footprint. So we can actually look at and decompose the supply chain environmental impact. We generate reports to visualize all the relationships which you saw in the knowledge graph earlier. And they just take a little bit of time to load here as this comes up. But effectively, you'll have a report which shows you the digital product passport. I'll cover this in more detail in a minute. All the information around it down to the chemical level. You've got all the information around the emission reports, and you've got here that circularity view from cradle to gate. So we didn't have cradle to grave information in this case, but we got cradle to grave. So you got both sustainability information, plus also you've got scope information in terms of emissions. That's in Sustain 360. But if I then pivot now, and you can see there there is a blockchain for this data payload. Okay, there's an alpha build, a blockchain. There's a tick mark that all this data resides in a blockchain ledger. Again, if you wanted to scan that, you can see the digital product passport. So this gives you a Sustain 360 is providing all the modeling, the sustainable metrics, the reporting, and what happens with that information is that we then provide that as another API from Sustain 360 back into EPIM. So see us as an engine within Viamedici's EPIM product set. As Al said, we're effectively looking at this as a plugin. And what happens here, just those reports I just showed you earlier, and now displayed. And there's our digital product passport. We talked about having a blockchain against it. There's his carbon footprint. There's his eco score, and it's all ratings against all those metrics, environmental impact metrics, and overall rating by component, what the emissions are. Then each component has its breakdown and rating, calculation of environmental impact down to the molecule level. So hopefully that shows you that we send back the information back into EPIM, and so the dashboards and analytics can be visualized as a kind of approach to seeing your information, your sustainability information. And obviously this information is also available through that QR code, which is on the e-commerce side. And also we can also represent carbon information if we wanted to do that. So here's the lifecycle state, LCA, the lifecycle assessment report, which is visualized in the product. And hopefully that gives you a good kind of tour of the software here. And now you may be skeptical about whether we really have a blockchain and whether this is genuine in where we're at. I'm going to now in real time show you that there is a token associated with this. So if I go here, I just have to do this in a different browser, and I bring up
Hi, Baz. I'd like to just remind the audience that they can certainly put any questions into the session if there's any questions that come up, because I've noticed that there hasn't been much questioning coming from folks, and I know that there are questions. So feel free to put the questions into the LinkedIn session. Sorry for the interruption there.
No problems at all. Thanks, Al. And he just gave me the time to find the actual extension, which is the wallet. So just to finish this off, you can see there is a wallet here. If I go into the AlphaBuild wallet here, and I look at the digital product passport for that power drill, we associated that multiple keys were generated. The one which is relevant right now is that particular one, and that is the one which is effectively represented on the digital product passport report I showed earlier. So hopefully that sort of Al and the team brings together, the kind of demonstration of how EPIM, Sustain 360 interoperate with each other to create this experience around sustainability and environmental footprint. In terms of next steps, how do clients get started? Well, if you're looking at the journey towards sustainability, assessing the impact of regulations, such as the EcoDesign directives, which have been planned. And let's look at those, evaluate the maturity, the quality of the data within EPIM and the product data sets which is required. You could then scope out, prioritize products and projects which are required. Customers can get started immediately in terms of if they need to produce environmental product declaration sheets. So that's kind of a stepping stone towards a digital product passport, in my view. So as I showed you earlier, there was a life cycle assessment created for that power drill. So that power drill's life cycle assessment can Sustain 360 generates an environmental product declaration sheet, which is effectively the information you have to share with your customers or with the regulators around the environmental impact. So Sustain 360 does create EPDs as well. And so that's a sort of immediate starting step, and that's a step towards digital product passports. Then the sort of scope out and implement this in a sort of pilot and scale this out as you go forward. So with that, I think Al, any questions or any information?
Yeah, I've had a few questions that have come in. I mean, one question that was brought up is, I just saw another one that came up as well. Yes, so Sustain 360 is integrated with Viamedici EPIM. As Baz just showed, we're doing a handshaking back and forth. We actually have the bill of material information that we sent to Sustain 360, and then in turn, they do the computation, the assessment, and then they send that information back into Viamedici's EPIM system within the hierarchy. And then from the hierarchy, we actually have all the product information available along with the reports themselves. And then you can syndicate that information out to the channels that require it. Actually, I don't know. Baz, did you show the e-commerce preview? I don't know if that was.
I did. I showed the e-commerce preview.
Okay.
Yeah, it did show that. Yeah, absolutely.
So we can do an e-commerce preview. We can also do a print preview. You can actually create a PDF and send that information out. And so one of the things that's interesting in this whole thing that we've actually talked about is if you look at a number of the companies that are looking at digital product passport, and we didn't even get into the specifications of the time frames when this stuff will be required, but they're actually looking at the creation of an RFID tag in concert with product information. And one of the things that's different in terms of our approach and the things that we're doing is, as Baz has pointed out, is we're actually utilizing blockchain to actually do the stamping of that data and then a QR code so that you'll actually have the ability to go back and view what's going on with that specific product without having to have an RFID associated with it. And actually that product data will be available and maintained within EPIM for syndication to any of the, whether it's direct to a retailer or, e-commerce application or a marketplace or wherever it happens to go. So the answer to that question is yes. I had another question that was basically, what customers are we working with? And there are several customers. I don't think we're in a position to actually name names, but we have about 4 companies that are current Viamedici customers that are working with us on this initiative and at various stages. And not only that, it was very well received last week where there were some new ones that wanted to get involved with us as well. So this is actually on everyone's radar, as I mentioned, and what we've really covered today has been around the digital product passport and the EPD, essentially. But in the future, we'll actually be looking more at ESG and sustainability and utilization of master data management and our full suite with hierarchies and information that's associated with that. So that's another thing. I had another question that came in that was actually interesting, and it's not really about sustainability, but I think it actually applies to blockchain. And they said, what would blockchain have for other industries potentially? And so I think there's a whole host of things that could come up, and I don't want to deviate from our sustainability discussion, but certainly blockchain allows you to look at, companies or products that could potentially be in the gray market and actually have a stamping of that information and validation of that information and utilized in concert with the PIM application, more from an operational perspective, getting it to the digital shelf. So that was another question that came up. Are there other ones that people have? Certainly feel free to write them in, and we'll be happy to address them. Well, wait a second here. Additionally, I'd like to apologize for my screen progressing. It threw me off a little bit there. I worked on the presentation on the flight over from Europe last week, or last night, I should say, and I turned it off, but it must have turned itself back on. So apologies for that. It threw me off a little bit. But one of the things I did want to mention at the beginning when I was talking about the energy that's behind sustainability is that the analyst firms have been really pushing sustainability as well. Gartner views it as in their top 3 priorities, and a number of other groups that have come up and noted the importance of sustainability in the reporting and the application sets that are utilizing this.
It's just a kind of couple of things to add to what Al said. On the data side, if you remember, the key message was that 70% of all emissions are in your supply chain and the use of your products, and so it's a data problem. You know, it's obviously an environmental problem, but to fix the environmental problem, you got to get the data. And so Viamedici and the implementation of Viamedici's EPIM solution becomes a fantastic stepping stone. Okay, a repository of good data, clean data, to feed into Sustain 360 as an engine, which embedded in there to push back to you know, your usage of your products with a sustainability lens. And so I think that is a kind of key point around getting the data in. The other thing about that, which I didn't mention, was that within Sustain 360, I mentioned it on the Viamedici side, there is a significant amount of AI. When I brought up the knowledge graph, and those things were in scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, and scope 2 and scope 3 in terms of the drill, that is automatically classified. And then there's the classification of those metrics, the sustainability metrics, there's 12 of them. How is that calculated? Again, that is an automated mechanism for doing that. So what AI is doing is effectively, what I call AI for good, effectively is complementing the automation of those metrics so they can be easily done and reported, so they can have the speed at which you can provide the information back to your clients. There's another question there.
Yeah, there were 2 other questions. One question that came up is this topic something that comes up in the U.S. as much as Europe? And I'll take my crack at it, and then I'll defer to Baz because he's much more knowledgeable than me. But I think we're seeing a few things. So California is actually ahead of Europe in a number of areas, which is kind of surprising. They're doing scope 3. They're focusing in on, you know, full traceability. You know, really a major push. But most of Europe is obviously much ahead of the U.S. in terms of this being a need. In terms of DPP, interestingly enough, the fashion industry and the battery industries are the 2 industries that are doing things most immediately, and then I think electrical will follow that. And so a number of the battery groups are actually looking at doing pilots into this year, as well as some of the fashion companies have committed to doing some things this year. And then other companies are preparing to get ahead in the future. But I think another thing that we're seeing a lot too, and it was raised in the Wall Street Journal article, is not just looking at CO2, but looking at the forever chemicals and the composition of those chemicals in products. And so that's a reporting thing that's required. And that's something that Sustain 360 does, and something that we will be able to capitalize on as part of our product information, both from an MDM and PIM perspective. So I'll turn it over to you, Baz, because you know a lot more about Europe versus US, but that's my quick thumbnail on it.
Yeah, so Europe is ahead from a number of perspectives, both from an kind of the emission side, but also the offset side in terms of exchanges which are in place there. So there's kind of a major push there with the EU there. And some of the regulation which have been implemented. And you say this regulation around EcoDesign into products, which is pending, and then digital product passports is again further ahead. But what you are seeing here in the US, as Al pointed out, the California climate bill, which was published, I think, in October, November last year, really was more stringent than anything which is in Europe, because he actually put a lot of emphasis not just on 1 and 2, but on scope 3. The European legislation is still more scope 1, 2 sort of focused and moving towards scope 3. But we saw clear evidence in my view, what I saw is in the California bill, and then also climate risk. So it's actually made a bigger emphasis on climate risk. So we're seeing sort of Europe ahead, but let's say what happened in, just to echo what Al said, what was in California with the climate bill, sort of getting up there in terms of what's required. Okay.
Several things. We will be having a webinar series around the various applications that we are providing. Our AI capabilities, our full PIM capabilities based on EPIM 5, and an overview of its capabilities. We'll have a discussion and a webinar on digital product passport. We'll have a real-time webinar on utilizing our dynamic configuration with one of our customers' data sets. I think it'll be in the building supply industry. And so we're very excited about these various webinars and seminars that we'll be providing. And you can find this information on our LinkedIn site. You can also find this information on our website. You can contact me directly if you would like to see something before we get to these things. Same thing with Baz. If you're interested in sustainability and you'd like to learn more about what they're doing, I'd encourage you to go to their website at Sustain 360. I'd also encourage you to go to Viamedici's website at viamedici.com, which is in this QR code here. And then I'd like you also to go to connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as Baz. If you're interested in getting some direct feedback or direct questions, we're happy to answer any questions that you have both now or in the future. And we'd like to have you be part of our community to learn about all the exciting things that we're doing in the industry. With that, I'd like to thank you for your participation this morning or afternoon, wherever you may be. And look forward to having you at our next webinar. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.